Mogilev is an ancient city on the banks of the majestic Dnieper, whose history spans more than 7 centuries. Its strategic location at the crossroads of trade routes always made it a key defense point for Belarusian lands. When the Great Patriotic War began in June 1941, Mogilev found itself at the spearhead of the German offensive. On the 23rd day of June, the city was subjected to its first bombardment, and already in July, a heroic battle unfolded, the legendary defense of Mogilev, which lasted 23 days. At that time, the city became a symbol of resilience, but the forces were unequal. After capturing Mogilev, the Germans turned it into a powerful fortified area, part of the Eastern Wall defense system. 3 years of occupation brought untold suffering. By the summer of 1944, the Red Army had prepared a grandiose offensive, Operation Bagration, designed to liberate Belarus. Mogilev, transformed by the enemy into a fortress on the Dnieper, became one of the key targets of the offensive. The Second Belarusian Front faced the most difficult task: to force the mighty Dnieper and storm the well-fortified city. By the spring of 1944, Mogilev represented a powerful fortified area within the German defense system. Located on the high right bank of the Dnieper, the city possessed natural advantages for the defending side. The steep slopes of the Dnieper banks, reaching up to 30 meters in height in some places, created ideal conditions for organizing multi-tiered fire. The enemy skillfully utilized the terrain features, transforming Mogilev into a veritable fortress. The German command viewed the city as a key defensive hub on the eastern flank of Army Group Center. Mogilev controlled crucial transport arteries, the Minsk-Smolensk Railway, and highways connecting the central part of Belarus with its eastern regions. Holding this point allowed the enemy to maintain the stability of the entire front. During 3 years of occupation, the Germans created 3 defensive lines around Mogilev, with a total depth of up to 20 kilometers. The outer line ran along the left bank of the Dnieper and included a developed system of full-profile trenches with communication passages. The second line was located directly on the right bank of the river and consisted of 2 to 3 lines of trenches with pillboxes and armored caps. The third line encompassed the city itself and represented a system of strong points in stone buildings. Within Mogilev itself, the Germans created 15 powerful resistance nodes, interconnected by trenches and underground passages. The railway station, elevator, distillery, and the building of the Regional Party Committee were particularly heavily fortified. Every large stone building was transformed into a strong point with embrasures, machine gun nests, and mined approaches. The defense of Mogilev was carried out by a large enemy grouping, including units of the 12th Wehrmacht Infantry Division, reinforced by artillery, tanks, and special engineering units. The total strength of the German garrison reached 20,000 personnel. They were armed with approximately 300 guns and mortars, dozens of tanks and assault guns. For the Red Army, the liberation of Mogilev had not only strategic, but also immense moral significance. This city, heroically defended in '41, was now to return to its native fold. The capture of Mogilev opened the way to Minsk and created conditions for the encirclement of the entire eastern enemy grouping in Belarus. The Second Belarusian Front was formed on February 24, 1944, based on the administration of the disbanded Northwestern Front. Colonel General Georgy Fyodorovich Zakharov was appointed commander, an experienced military leader who rose from commander of a rifle division to army commander. His combat experience, strategic thinking, and ability to find unconventional solutions played an important role in preparing for the upcoming operation. The front included the 50th and 49th Armies, as well as the 3rd and 4th Air Armies. The core of the Udarnaya grouping consisted of rifle formations with extensive experience in offensive operations. The 81st and 49th Rifle Corps, staffed by experienced soldiers and commanders, were particularly distinguished.
The front's artillery numbered over 3,000 guns and mortars of various calibers. The 203rd Howitzer Artillery Brigade and the 728th Fighter Anti-Tank Regiment, equipped with the latest weapons, were to play a special role. Tank units were represented by separate tank and self-propelled artillery regiments, armed with T-34 tanks and Su-152 self-propelled guns. The front's engineering troops had special equipment for forcing water obstacles, pontoon parks, amphibians, and crossing equipment. The planning of the Mogilev operation began in April 1944. The front headquarters, under the leadership of Lieutenant General Pyotr Ivanovich Lyapin, conducted detailed reconnaissance of German positions. Special attention was paid to studying the enemy's defense system on the Dnieper line and in the city itself. A crucial element of preparation was the creation of detailed terrain models, on which variants of crossing the Dnieper and the subsequent assault on city blocks were practiced. Commanders of all levels, from platoon to corps, studied the specifics of the upcoming combat operations, taking into account specific areas. Troop training included special exercises for forcing water obstacles in the rear areas of the Dnieper and its tributaries. Sappers trained infantrymen in constructing makeshift crossing equipment, rafts made of logs and planks, boats made of raincoats. Artillerymen practiced firing techniques from temporary floating platforms. The Vaterland Line truly embodied the German defensive doctrine on the Eastern Front. In the Mogilev area, this system of fortifications represented a deeply echeloned defense, consisting of 5 lines with a total length of up to 40 kilometers. Each line included 2 or 3 trenches, interconnected by a branched network of communication passages. The approaches to the Dnieper and the river line itself were especially thoroughly fortified. The first defensive line was located 8 to 10 kilometers from the river and consisted of anti-tank ditches up to 3 meters deep, minefields, and wire obstacles in 3 or 4 rows. Here, the Germans equipped hundreds of firing points, including concrete machine gun nests and artillery positions. A distinctive feature of this line was the creation of so-called false positions, artfully camouflaged mock-ups of firing points designed to divert Soviet artillery fire. The second line, running directly along the left bank of the Dnieper, included a system of pillboxes and bunkers, located at a distance of 100 to 150 meters from each other. German engineers skillfully utilized the terrain, placing firing points on dominant heights. Here, casemates for artillery were also equipped, allowing for flanking fire along the riverbed. The right bank part of the defense was a true fortified area. Steep slopes up to 30 meters high were transformed into a multi-tiered fire system. Machine gun and artillery positions were located on each tier, connected by vertical communication passages. Armored caps, steel domes with embrasures, mounted on concrete foundations, played a special role. In Mogilev itself, the Germans created 15 resistance nodes, each capable of conducting an all-round defense. The central nodes were the railway station, the regional party committee building, and the Castle Hill. Stone buildings were transformed into real forts with embrasures, loopholes, and basements adapted for prolonged defense. Streets were blocked by reinforced concrete barricades, and anti-tank guns were placed at intersections. The German command paid special attention to anti-tank defense. Extensive minefields were created around the city, with a density of up to 6,000 mines per kilometer of front. Anti-tank hedgehogs, dragon's teeth, and escarps were installed in tank-dangerous directions. Artillery anti-tank positions were equipped according to the horseshoe principle, which allowed for hitting Soviet tanks with flanking fire. The Mogilev garrison numbered about 35,000 soldiers and officers. The core of the defense consisted of units from the 12th Infantry and 31st Grenadier Divisions, reinforced by assault gun and heavy artillery units. The 714th Anti-Tank Battalion, armed with the latest PaK-43 anti-tank guns,
played a special role. On June 22, 1944, exactly 3 years after the war began, a powerful artillery barrage heralded the start of the Second Belarusian Front's offensive. At 5 in the morning, over 2,000 cannons and mortars unleashed a hail of fire on the first line of German defense. The earth trembled from the shell explosions, and the fire density reached 120 rounds per kilometer of front per minute. The artillery preparation lasted 2 hours. During this time, Soviet artillerymen methodically suppressed identified enemy firing points, destroyed dugouts and pillboxes, and cleared paths through minefields and wire obstacles. German command posts and communication hubs were subjected to particularly heavy shelling. Following the artillery, aviation entered the fray. IL-2 attack aircraft, in groups of 6 to 8 machines, struck enemy strongholds. Pilots of the 4th Air Army, under the command of Colonel General Konstantin Vershinin, carried out over 500 sorties on the first day of the offensive. PE-2 and Tu-2 bombers destroyed enemy artillery positions and reserves deep within the defense. At 7 in the morning, after a short fire raid, the infantry and tanks went on the offensive. Lieutenant General Ivan Grishin's 49th Army delivered the main blow in the Mogilev direction. The advanced battalions of the 1st Echelon Rifle Divisions swiftly attacked enemy positions. The German defense, despite heavy damage, offered fierce resistance. Surviving firing points met the advancing units with a hail of machine gun fire. Hand-to-hand combat broke out in some areas. Particularly stubborn battles unfolded for strongholds in the villages of Kolmi and Dobreka, which the Germans had turned into veritable fortresses. By noon of the first day of the offensive, units of the 81st Rifle Corps had broken through the enemy's first line of defense on a 7-kilometer-wide sector and advanced up to 5 kilometers deep. Second echelons of rifle divisions were introduced into the breach, which allowed for the development of success and the expansion of the breakthrough sector. By the end of June 22nd, Soviet troops had overcome the enemy's first defensive belt along the entire offensive sector. The Germans, attempting to halt the Red Army's advance, launched several counterattacks with reserve battalions supported by assault guns. The counterattack in the area of the village of Selets was particularly fierce, where the enemy committed up to a regiment of infantry and 15 tanks to the battle. However, Soviet artillery and assault aviation promptly suppressed these attempts. Anti-tank regiments, deployed to tank dangerous directions, met the German tanks with concentrated fire. In the Selets area alone, 7 enemy vehicles were knocked out. On the second day of the offensive, the pace of the Soviet troops' advance increased. Units of the 49th Army, overcoming enemy resistance, advanced another 8 kilometers, reached the Basya River, and forced a crossing on the move. Now, the path to the Dnieper lay open before the advancing troops. The forcing of the Dnieper became a key stage of the Mogilev operation. The water barrier, 150 to 300 meters wide, with a strong current and a high right bank, presented a serious obstacle. Engineering reconnaissance, conducted on the eve of the offensive, identified the most suitable crossing sections in the areas of the villages Buinichi, Polikovichi, and Novi Bykov. It was here that the riverbed had relatively gentle banks and less depth. On June 26, 1944, after powerful artillery preparation, advanced assault groups began the forcing. Sappers under the command of Colonel Vasily Karchavin prepared various crossing means, from standard pontoon bridges to rafts made of improvised materials. Each rifle battalion received at least 10 boats and several rafts. Amphibious vehicles, floating cars capable of transporting up to 20 soldiers or towing pontoons, played a special role. Units of the 385th Rifle Division of Colonel Mikhail Supranov were the first to reach the river. Under the cover of pre-dawn twilight, assault groups in boats and on rafts rushed to the opposite bank. The Germans opened hurricane fire, but a dense smoke screen created by special units made aiming difficult. Artillery observers corrected the fire of Soviet batteries, suppressing identified enemy firing points. Aviation delivered pinpoint strikes on resistance nodes on the right bank. IL-2 attack aircraft literally hung over German positions, preventing the enemy from raising their heads. By 8 in the morning, the first bridgeheads, up to 300 meters deep, were captured on the right bank. Sappers immediately began to build pontoon bridges for the crossing of heavy equipment and artillery. The work was carried out under continuous fire, but thanks to clear organization and the dedication of the soldiers, the first bridge with a carrying capacity of up to 60 tons was built by noon. Particularly fierce battles unfolded on the bridgehead near the village of Polikovichi. The Germans launched a counterattack with an infantry battalion supported by 8 assault guns. Soviet soldiers, entrenched on the bank, repelled 7 attacks, holding their captured positions. Anti-tank crews, who crossed in the first echelons, played a decisive role. By the end of the day, the bridgeheads were expanded to 2 kilometers along the front and 1 kilometer in depth, which allowed the main forces to begin crossing. The forcing of the Dnieper became a test of courage and resilience for thousands of Soviet soldiers. In the pre-dawn gloom of June 26, 1944, Sergeant Ivan Berezhnoy was the first to reach the right bank of the river. Commanding a reconnaissance squad, he discovered a camouflaged enemy firing point and, acting decisively, threw grenades at it. This allowed the assault group to secure a narrow foothold. When the Germans counterattacked, Berezhnoy organized an all-around defense. For 8 hours, his soldiers held the tiny bridgehead, repelling 4 enemy attacks. For this feat, the sergeant was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. Extraordinary courage was also shown by Lieutenant Mikhail Sokolov, commander of a pontoon platoon. Under heavy enemy fire, his soldiers built a crossing over the Dnieper. When a pontoon was damaged by an enemy shell, Sokolov plunged into the icy water and, risking his life, repaired the damage. The crossing continued to operate, ensuring the advance of the main forces. The lieutenant was severely wounded by a fragment, but remained in action until the operation was completed. A special role in the forcing of the Dnieper was played by the 342nd Separate Amphibious Battalion, under the command of Major Pyotr Dmitriev. His amphibious vehicles made more than 100 trips across the river in a day, delivering ammunition, evacuating the wounded, and transferring reinforcements. During one of the trips, Dmitriev's vehicle was hit, but the crew, showing ingenuity, managed to deliver valuable cargo, anti-tank guns, to the right bank. The commander of an artillery battery, Captain Grigory Larionov, became a true hero of the crossing. Having crossed among the first, he skillfully organized firing positions on the captured bridgehead. When the Germans threw 15 tanks into a counterattack, Larionov's battery engaged in an unequal battle. The artillerymen knocked out 7 enemy vehicles. The rest turned back. The captain himself was wounded, but continued to adjust fire until reinforcements arrived. The rifle company of Senior Lieutenant Alexei Morozov entrenched itself on the steep bank of the Dnieper near the village of Buinichi. The Germans, aiming to throw the Soviet soldiers into the river, unleashed a barrage of artillery fire on them, and then went on the attack. Morozov's soldiers, sheltering in hastily dug trenches, met the enemy with dense rifle and machine gun fire. At a critical moment of the battle, the senior lieutenant led the company in a counterattack. The swift thrust of the Soviet soldiers decided the outcome of the battle. The Germans retreated, leaving dozens of dead and wounded on the battlefield. By June 27, 1944, Soviet command had developed a plan to encircle the enemy's Mogilev grouping. The successful crossing of the Dnieper created favorable conditions for enveloping the city from the north and south. The 50th Army of Lieutenant General Ivan Boldin was tasked with bypassing Mogilev from the northwest, and the 49th Army of Lieutenant General Ivan Grishin from the southwest. Thus, the encirclement ring was to close west of the city, cutting off retreat routes for the German garrison. The operation began with the swift advance of the 50th Army's shock group.
The 238th Rifle Division of Colonel Ivan Krasnoshtanov, reinforced by a tank regiment, executed a deep flanking maneuver, covering more than 20 kilometers in a day. Tankers and motorized infantry acted decisively, bypassing resistance nodes and advancing along country roads. Aviation of the 4th Air Army continuously struck retreating enemy columns, preventing the Germans from organizing defenses on intermediate lines. From the south, units of the 49th Army advanced. The 199th Rifle Division of Colonel Mikhail Kononenko, having crossed the Dnieper south of Mogilev, rapidly advanced westward. Interaction between the armies was ensured by special liaison officers and air spotters. Radio communication was maintained around the clock, allowing front command to promptly react to changes in the situation. German command realized the threat of encirclement only by the evening of June 27th. Lieutenant General Gottfried von Erdmannsdorf, commander of the Mogilev grouping, requested permission to retreat, but received a categorical order from Field Marshal Ernst Busch to hold the city at all costs. Nevertheless, the Germans attempted to organize a breakthrough. Two battle groups were formed from reserves, which were to break through towards each other and create a corridor for the evacuation of the main forces. Soviet intelligence timely uncovered these plans. Anti-tank reserves were deployed in the probable breakthrough directions. The 728th Fighter Anti-Tank Regiment of Major Semyon Gurevich took up positions on the western outskirts of Mogilev. When a German battle group, including 15 tanks and assault guns, attempted to break through, it was met with concentrated fire from anti-tank artillery. In a short but fierce battle, the enemy lost 8 armored units and was forced to retreat. On June 28, 1944, the decisive phase of the Mogilev operation began, the assault on the city itself. By this point, the encirclement ring around the German garrison had practically closed. Soviet command developed a detailed assault plan, taking into account the peculiarities of the urban development and the system of German fortifications. The city was divided into 5 sectors, each of which was stormed by a separate rifle division. The attack began at dawn, after a 30-minute artillery barrage. A distinctive feature of the artillery preparation was the use of heavy guns to destroy enemy strongholds in stone buildings. The 203rd Howitzer Artillery Brigade fired direct fire at identified resistance nodes. Special assault groups were formed for the assault, including riflemen, sappers, flamethrower operators, and artillerymen. Each group numbered from 20 to 30 fighters and had a clear task to capture a specific object. The tactics of street fighting were based on the principle of infiltration. Small groups of submachine gunners bypassed enemy strongholds, penetrating into courtyards and breaches in walls. The main forces followed, blocking and destroying pockets of resistance. Tanks and self-propelled guns operated in close cooperation with the infantry. Each armored vehicle was accompanied by a group of submachine gunners, protecting it from enemy Faust patrons. Tank crews, in turn, suppressed firing points in buildings, allowing the infantry to advance. Particularly fierce battles unfolded for the railway station, a powerful resistance hub with reinforced concrete fortifications. The assault group of Captain Nikolai Kirichenko, reinforced with flamethrower operators, attacked the building from 3 sides simultaneously. The Germans put up fierce resistance, but after a 3-hour battle the station was taken. Sappers played a key role, making passages in the building's walls with explosives. Another important object was the elevator, a 5-story reinforced concrete structure turned into a real fortress by the enemy. A direct assault threatened heavy losses, so the command made an unconventional decision. While one group simulated a frontal attack, another penetrated the building through underground communications. The sudden appearance of Soviet soldiers in the rear of the defenders decided the outcome of the battle. By midday, Soviet troops already controlled 2/3 of the city territory. The Germans, realizing the hopelessness of the situation, began to retreat to the city center,
where the last line of defense was located, a complex of administrative buildings. Mobile detachments in vehicles, equipped with heavy machine guns, were created to pursue the retreating enemy. These detachments cut off escape routes and disorganized the command of German units. By the evening of June 28th, enemy resistance was broken. The commander of the Mogilev garrison, Lieutenant General von Erdmannsdorf, understanding the hopelessness of the situation, decided to surrender. More than 6,000 German soldiers and officers surrendered. Mogilev was completely liberated. Artillery and aviation played a decisive role in the success of the Mogilev operation. The Soviet command perfectly understood that an assault on a fortified city without powerful fire support was doomed to failure. To ensure the offensive, a powerful artillery grouping was created, comprising over 2,000 guns and mortars of various calibers. The artillery density in the direction of the main thrust reached 120 barrels per kilometer of front, an unprecedented concentration of firepower by the standards of 44. The artillery offensive began with a powerful preparation lasting 2 hours. During this time, over 100,000 shells and mines rained down on enemy positions. The use of heavy guns proved particularly effective. The 203rd Howitzer Artillery Brigade, equipped with 152mm howitzers, literally plowed up the German fortifications. The method of artillery support was based on the principle of sequential transfer of fire deep into the enemy's defense. When the infantry rose to attack, fire was shifted 100 to 200 meters forward, then further still, creating a wall of fire in front of the advancing units. This approach allowed for constant suppression of enemy firing points directly in front of the attacking units. Regimental and divisional artillery, operating within the infantry's combat formations, played a special role. 45mm anti-tank guns and 76mm regimental guns were brought forward for direct fire and destroyed enemy pillboxes and armored cupolas. The crews of these guns displayed exceptional courage, firing under direct fire from German snipers and mortars. During the crossing of the Dnieper, artillerymen developed an original method of fire support. Light guns were transported on pontoons and rafts, along with the first echelons of infantry, and immediately opened fire on the enemy from the captured bridgeheads. Forward observers equipped with radio stations were used to adjust fire. They moved within the infantry's combat formations and adjusted the fire of batteries remaining on the left bank. During the city assault, artillery employed the tactic of firing from concealed positions at the upper floors and roofs of buildings where the enemy had placed machine gun nests and sniper positions. Simultaneously, direct fire guns destroyed barricades and breached walls, ensuring the advance of assault groups. The engineering support for combat operations during the liberation of Mogilev was a true triumph of military engineering thought. Sapper and engineering units performed the most complex tasks on which the success of the entire operation directly depended. Even at the stage of preparing the offensive, engineering reconnaissance conducted a detailed study of German defensive structures, compiling accurate maps of minefields, anti-tank ditches, and wire obstacles. Reconnaissance engineers, operating in small groups, penetrated the enemy's rear, obtaining valuable information about the nature of fortifications and the defense system on the Dnieper line. Special attention was paid to studying the Dnieper coastline, searching for fords and convenient places for building crossings. Mine clearance of the approaches to Mogilev became one of the most difficult tasks. The Germans created extensive minefields with a density of up to 6,000 mines per kilometer of front. To overcome them, special demining groups were formed, equipped with mine detectors, probes, and demining tools. Working under enemy fire, sappers made passages up to 6 meters wide in the minefields, marking them with special pointers. During the preparation of the operation, over 30,000 mines of various types were neutralized. Mines surprises and delayed action mines, installed by the Germans in areas of probable concentration of Soviet troops, presented particular difficulty. Special high-sensitivity mine detectors and service dogs trained to find explosives were used to detect them. A key aspect of engineering support was the creation of crossings over the Dnieper. Engineering units had pontoon bridge parks, boats, cutters, and amphibious transporters. Dozens of rafts made of improvised materials, logs, boards, empty barrels, were prepared for crossing the river. Each rifle regiment received the necessary number of crossing means, which allowed for a mass crossing in the shortest possible time. Pontoon bridges were built under continuous enemy fire. Sappers worked in icy water, installing supports and securing pontoons. Smoke screens and false crossings, which diverted enemy fire, were used to camouflage the crossings. In total, during the operation, 4 pontoon bridges with a carrying capacity of 60 to 100 tons were built across the Dnieper. This allowed heavy artillery, tanks, and self-propelled guns to be transported to the right bank. In urban combat, sappers performed special tasks. They cleared approaches to buildings, made passages in walls using explosives, and neutralized booby traps set by the retreating enemy. Assault groups invariably included 2 or 3 sappers who went ahead of the infantry, ensuring safe advance. Extended charges and cumulative mines were used to overcome barricades and anti-tank obstacles. Sappers also set charges to blow up particularly strong enemy fortifications. June 28, 1944, became the day of Mogilev's final liberation. The dawn of this historic day began with a powerful artillery strike on the enemy's last pockets of resistance. Soviet troops, having encircled the city from 3 sides, launched a decisive assault. Units of the 369th Rifle Division, under Colonel Sergei Kazishvili, attacked the central quarters, where the Germans had established their last line of defense. Assault groups, acting according to a prearranged plan, methodically cleared street after street, block after block. By 10 o'clock in the morning, the city's railway station was liberated, a powerful node of resistance, transformed by the Germans into a veritable fortress. Lieutenant Vasily Petrov's assault group, using smoke grenades, managed to approach the building and barrage the embrasures with grenades. The swift attack decided the outcome of the battle. After a short but fierce struggle, the station was taken. 83 German soldiers and 3 officers surrendered. Simultaneously, units of the 238th Rifle Division stormed the city's administrative center. Here, the enemy offered particularly stubborn resistance. Every stone building was turned into a strong point, with machine guns and snipers firing from windows and basements. Soviet command employed an effective tactic. While some units engaged the enemy from the front, others outflanked the buildings from the sides and rear. Sappers created breaches in the walls, allowing assault groups to penetrate inside. By noon, the city council building was liberated, over which Sergeant Mikhail Igorov and Private Pyotr Kravtsov hoisted the red banner. This moment became symbolic. The flag, waving over the central square, was visible from all ends of the city. In the southern part of Mogilev, the 692nd Rifle Regiment, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Andrei Smirnov, fought for the industrial zone. Here, the Germans had transformed factory buildings into powerful fortifications. The garrison of the flax mill offered particularly stubborn resistance. Soviet soldiers used anti-tank rifles to breach walls and ceilings. By 1400 hours, resistance in this area was broken. By 1600 hours, the ring around the remaining enemy grouping finally closed. The German command, realizing the hopelessness of the situation, began negotiations for surrender. At 1730 hours, Lieutenant General Gottfried von Erdmannsdorf signed the Act of Unconditional Surrender. The Mogilev garrison ceased resistance. More than 3,500 soldiers and officers, including 2 generals, surrendered. The trophies of the Soviet troops included 120 artillery pieces, 300 machine guns, and warehouses with ammunition and military equipment. By the evening of June 28th, Mogilev was completely cleared of the enemy. Residents, who had awaited liberation for 3 years, came out into the streets. They greeted Soviet soldiers with flowers, embracing their liberators. Many could not hold back tears of joy. At 1900 hours, a solemn rally was held in the city's central square. The commander of the 49th Army, Lieutenant General Ivan Grishin, congratulated the troops on their victory. In his speech, he noted the heroism of the soldiers and officers demonstrated during the crossing of the Dnieper and the storming of the city. The general expressed special gratitude to the residents of Mogilev, who, during 3 years of occupation, had not lost faith in victory and had helped the partisans. In the evening, an artillery salute thundered over the liberated city. 20 volleys from 120 guns in honor of the great victory. The Mogilev operation became an important link in the chain of offensive actions of Soviet troops in the summer of 1944. Its military strategic significance is difficult to overestimate. The liberation of Mogilev, one of the largest cities in Belarus, dealt a serious blow to the entire system of German defense on the central sector of the Eastern Front. The elimination of a powerful enemy fortified area on the Dnieper created favorable conditions for a further offensive in the direction of Minsk and the encirclement of the entire eastern grouping of the Wehrmacht in Belarus. The successful forced crossing of the Dnieper and the storming of the city demonstrated the increased skill of Soviet troops in conducting complex offensive operations. In 6 days of the offensive, the troops of the Second Belarusian Front advanced up to 35 kilometers deep, forced a large water barrier, and liberated a strategically important city. The losses of the German army were catastrophic. During the Mogilev operation, the enemy lost more than 6,000 soldiers and officers killed. Over 3,500 were taken prisoner, including 2 generals. The trophies of the Soviet troops included 120 guns of various calibers, 300 machine guns, 26 tanks and assault guns, more than 1,000 vehicles, warehouses with ammunition, fuel, and provisions. An important result of the operation was also that the German command lost the ability to maneuver reserves. Units transferred to hold Mogilev were defeated, which created additional difficulties for the enemy in other sectors of the front. The liberation of Mogilev also had enormous moral significance. The city, which became a symbol of the steadfastness of Soviet soldiers in the first days of the war, was now returned to its native fold. This inspired the soldiers of the Red Army to new feats, strengthening their confidence in a speedy victory. The Mogilev operation became a true school of military art, where Soviet troops demonstrated the highest skill in solving the most complex tactical problems. Forcing such a serious water barrier as the Dnieper under conditions of organized enemy defense required not only bravery, but also thorough preparation, thoughtful organization, and clear interaction of all branches of service. A key factor in success was the creation of a variety of crossing equipment, from standard pontoons to makeshift rafts. This allowed for a high density of crossing and rapid buildup of forces on captured bridgeheads. Especially effective was the use of amphibians, floating vehicles capable of delivering infantry and light artillery across the water barrier. This experience was subsequently widely applied in forcing other large rivers, the Vistula, Oder, Nysa. The most important element of success was thorough suppressive fire on the enemy. Artillery support for the crossing was built on the principle of sequential fire transfer, which allowed the enemy to be kept under constant pressure. An innovative solution was the crossing of artillery spotters with the first echelons of infantry. Equipped with radio stations, they adjusted the fire of batteries remaining on the starting bank. The assault on Mogilev showed the increased skill of Soviet troops in urban combat. The tactics of assault groups, including riflemen, sappers, flamethrowers, and artillerymen, proved highly effective. Each group had a clear task and the necessary means to accomplish it. Infiltrating between enemy strongholds with a subsequent attack from the rear and flanks allowed for minimizing losses and achieving success even when assaulting powerful fortifications. The interaction of tanks and infantry reached a new level. Tanks supported infantry with fire and armor, and infantry protected tanks from enemy grenadiers. Such close interaction allowed for successfully overcoming barricades and other anti-tank obstacles in urban conditions. The experience of the Mogilev operation showed the importance of engineering support. Sappers not only made passages through minefields and barriers, but also actively participated in the assault on fortified buildings, using explosives to create breaches in walls. This allowed for attacking the enemy from unexpected directions. The success of the operation was largely determined by clear command and control and communication. Commanders at all levels were in the combat formations of the troops, which ensured an operational response to changes in the situation. Radio communication was maintained continuously, allowing for the coordination of actions of various branches of service. Today, Mogilev is a city that carefully preserves the memory of its liberators. Monuments rise on its streets and squares, commemorating the heroism of Soviet soldiers in the summer of '44. The central memorial is the Buinichi Field Complex, a place of heroic defense at the beginning of the war and fierce battles for the city's liberation. The majestic barrow with a chapel and eternal flame symbolizes the unbreakable bond between generations and the sacred memory of fallen heroes. A special place is occupied by the memorial on Glory Square, where the names of the heroes of the Soviet Union who liberated Mogilev are carved on granite slabs. Here also lies the grave of the unknown soldier with an eternal flame, a sacred place for every city resident. On the banks of the Dnieper stands a monument to the liberator soldiers, a bronze figure of a soldier with an assault rifle facing forward. This monument stands precisely where the advanced detachments of the Red Army forced the river. Many veterans of the Mogilev operation visited the liberated city after the war. Sergeant Ivan Berezhnoy, who was the first to step onto the right bank of the Dnieper, became an honorary citizen of Mogilev after the war. Until the last days of his life, he would come to the site of his feat, meet with young people, and talk about his comrades in arms. Artilleryman Grigory Larionov, whose battery repelled a tank counterattack on the bridgehead, became a history teacher after the war. Every year on the 28th of June, he would take his students on an excursion to the battlefields. The connection between generations continues today. Mogilev schools have museums of military glory, where relics of the war years are carefully preserved. Letters from frontline soldiers, photographs, personal belongings of those who participated in the city's liberation. School children care for military graves, record veterans' memoirs, and participate in reconstructions of historical events. For modern residents of Mogilev, the events of the summer of '44 are not just a page of history, but a living memory passed down from generation to generation. The city's Liberation Day, the 28th of June, is celebrated as one of the main holidays. On this day, solemn ceremonies of laying flowers at monuments, meetings with veterans, concerts, and reconstructions of wartime events take place. The study of the Mogilev operations experience remains relevant for modern military specialists. The mastery of forcing water obstacles, the tactics of assaulting fortified cities, the organization of interaction between various branches of troops, all these aspects represent not only historical but also practical interest. The liberation of Mogilev is a bright page in the annals of the Great Patriotic War, an example of courage, resilience, and military skill. The memory of these events lives in people's hearts, reminding them of the price of peace and freedom.